All right, welcome back, everyone. I am going to introduce our next speaker. It is my pleasure to introduce Ohio State Representative Juanita Brent. Representative Juanita Brent is in her second term as a legislator representing and fighting for the people of District 12. Currently, she serves as a ranking member of the Agriculture and Conservation Committee. Her firsthand experience with farming has strengthened her ties to farmers in her community and has uniquely positioned her to lead food and farming activism in the political arena. Representative Brent was a co-sponsor on House Bill 95 to provide income tax credits for beginning farmers. Representative Brent also sits on the Transportation, Public Safety, Commerce, and Labor committees. In addition, she is the first vice president of the Ohio Legislative Black Caucus, which is the oldest Black caucus in the nation. Brent was recently highlighted by Civil Leads as a leader in a new generation of Black women driving new agricultural policy, working to benefit disadvantaged farmers and African Americans, and introducing legislation to promote equity in agriculture. We are fortunate that Representative Brent has taken time out of her busy day today to share with us her interests in equity in food, agricultural policy, and her recent work on soil health. Please feel free to use the chat box to join me in welcoming Representative Bonita Brent.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much to Ohio State for bringing this event together. I'm actually really excited because I always tell people that if you really want to know what's going on, you have to look at the soil, because soil is everything. Agriculture is everything, and it's always relevant to everything that people are doing within our country. When I first really started becoming really involved with agriculture, and particularly when it comes to soil health, was a long time ago when I initially had interest into 4-H as a child. So my interest in 4-H was really just kind of like a side hobby, something for my parents to put me in so they could keep me busy on those Saturday mornings. And it really became something that stayed with me all the way through my adult years, to the point where when I became a state representative, the only real committee that I asked to be on was the Agriculture and Conservation Committee, because that's what it's called now. But my first GA, it was called the Agriculture and Rural Development Committee. And so within that time period of just being in this space, everything goes back to soil health, everything. I don't care if you're talking about processing, meat processing. It doesn't matter if you're talking about, a runoff, everything goes back to soil. So this General Assembly, I've had the wonderful opportunity to work with different partners to come up with policy that will work on soil health, which is so vital. There's probably somebody sitting at home right now. This is your first time coming to an event like this. And it's like, why is soil health so important? And I'm gonna go back to the basics. Everyone eats. So no matter if you're having a community garden, if you are having a commercial farm, everyone gets their food from the ground. Even our animals, they are eating things that are from the ground. And if we are not sure what's in that soil, then how can we really control what's happening when it comes to the health of our food, the health of our animals, also our water quality? That all is based into our soil as a whole. So part of the legislation is basically the Soil Health Task Force when it comes to this legislation we're going to be introducing. And I'm so excited about this because it allows so many different partners to come and be involved with it. The set of partners include Ohio State University, Central State University. We're going to have different groups of farmers, some that are commodity farmers, some that are not commodity farmers, national people who are representative from national farms. Also, you're going to have the chairs of the Agriculture Committee from the Senate and also from the House. And so it's going to be like a group of almost like 20 different people, mostly people who will all be appointed to this spot of this Soil Health Task Force. And so it's just allowing us to bring different minds to the table, saying like, this is a priority for our state, because we have to be concerned about soil health. If anybody's been watching what's been going on in Toledo, runoff when it comes to our water and algae bloom, it all goes back to soil health. When you talk about Cleveland and the large amount of lead that is in the ground and how certain parts of the city is not usable for parks and recreation, it all goes back to soil health. So I'm gonna get more into this legislation, but I'm gonna tell you something that really sparked my interest too. I went to Japan obviously before the pandemic. This was probably about more than 10 years ago. And in the process of going to Japan, one thing that I saw that I was not exposed to more than 10 years ago was hemp. And at that time, and I believe they're still doing this, they were using hemp to help filtrate the ground. And if we know anything about hemp, even though it was just legalized almost 2 years ago with Senate Bill 57 that I co-sponsored, that time, 10 years ago, they were using that to help filtrate their water as well as their soil in a very natural way. Because if you're not taking care of the soil, there's nothing else you can really do with the ground unless the soil itself is healthy and it has the proper nutrition within the ground. And we are so like light years away from where other countries are when it comes to properly taking care of their soil. And at that moment, I just knew it was like a light bulb, like America, particularly Ohio, we need to put more emphasis on hemp and when it comes to our soil quality as a natural way to take care of our soil. So I'm hoping with this soil health task force, we can look at alternatives to take care of our soil within our state, and that we can be that example within the nation on what we need to do. Also too, within our time period of living in Cleveland, I have so many hoop farms, hood farms, we call them urban farms, where we have so many farmers who have to have raised beds farms because they are not able to use the soil that's naturally on the ground. And for those who are not in Cleveland, the reason why they're not able to use that soil that's on the ground is because of the high levels of lead. We have to address that problem so people do not have to continue having raised soil beds to be able to grow produce within their community, dealing with the issues of, farm to table, also dealing with the discrepancies of not having access to fresh produce. That all goes back to soil health. So if you have places that already do not have access to fresh produce and people need to grow within their home, you have to have good soil to be able to do so. And in this experience of talking to urban farmers, there were actually farmers who were growing their produce in bad soil. And so instead of getting their soil tested, people were just growing it and just bad soil and then selling it at their local farmers market. We have to put more emphasis on soil health because people are consuming these things. And if you are consuming something that is grown in soil that has a lot of lead in it, what do you think is happening to you as a whole? So these are things that I'm just seeing as the ranking, as a person who's in a community, as a person who has seen different farmers organize and get together on the importance of soil health. And so this is not just a rural issue. This is a people issue. This is an Ohio issue. This is a national issue that we address soil health. If you guys have any questions, please do not hesitate to put it in the chat. I'm sitting here looking to see if we have any questions as a whole to let me know. So I'm also looking in the chat to see if we have any questions within that. Also, when we talk about soil health, it's also supporting our farmers on the resources they need when it comes to soil health and helping them get those necessary nutrients. We have not done that properly. Our biggest sense of tax revenue within our state comes from agriculture, believe it or not. It comes right behind commercial selling, but agriculture is number 2. I just found out, I just got corrected within our state when it comes to tax revenue. And so we talk to any farmer, they're concerned about their soil, about the nutrition, about making sure things are tested properly within the state of Ohio. How can we make sure that this process is even easier? How can we make sure that this process is affordable? How can we make sure that there are enough testing sites, not testing sites, but people testing it in a timely manner, that information is going back to their community? All of those things are just very relevant within our communities. Yes, if you have any questions, please make sure you are putting them in the chat because I am actively looking for any questions. So don't think that I'm just rambling on without acknowledging your questions. One thing that we've seen, even as we are moving on to people who are moving on to the use of cannabis here within the state of Ohio, we have a medical cannabis program, and we are going to be having more and more people who are going to be using the land for that. No one wants something that's being medically used for you developed in bad soil. And so it goes back to what I said before, that if the soil is not right, the products that we are building from the soil is not going to be helpful to us as consumers, as patients, as people, as anything. And it all starts from the soil within our ground. Let's see. Is there any questions? Okay, still don't have any questions as a whole. But I look forward to introducing the legislation coming up in the near future. And so we can make sure we put that as an emphasis here within the state of Ohio. So when we get back to the concept of soil, we have to look at what is, if it's nitrogen or making sure it has enough carbon within the soil, what's in our ground as a whole. And I was like, that's just very vital when it comes to what we do here within the state of Ohio. And how we're moving forward with that is key if we want to keep agriculture particularly relevant, or just any use of soil relevant here within the state of Ohio as a whole. It says, I see I've received a question. Okay, so what has been your experience in working with food and agriculture stakeholders in the state of Ohio? Have you found allyship or opposition in your efforts? Thank you so much. And I'm about to say your name, but I do not want to mess it up. And it says, Karima, thank you so much for Karima. So, and it says, and somebody asked, is the Farm Bureau working with you on soil health? So I guess I did say your name right. So Karima, this experience of working on soil health has been very interesting. And the reason why I'm gonna say it's gonna be interesting, because when we look at where, no matter if you're talking about your Ohio Farm Bureau, if you're talking about your National Federation of Farmers, the face of that is not normally a 30-something-year-old Black woman. And so not everything is not particularly about race, but we've definitely been in a place when they talk about soil health that is not particularly, this is not the representation that people are looking for. So people are having to get used to just absorbing that this is a person who lives in Cleveland, who doesn't live on a farm, but hasn't been involved with 4-H this whole time. So I think people just have to digest that. But once we've had those conversations, it's been nothing but a lot of respect of being in this space. But it was definitely more or less like, oh, you're the ranking and you're the person that's going to be talking to us about this topic. So the Farm Bureau has definitely been a huge resource, and we've developed a really good relationship. And so the only people that I would say have been not so much opposition of soil health, but it's just been haters. I mean, that's the biggest thing. It's like, I don't think people are really against soil health. You find more partnerships than it, but sometimes people just want to have different people there to do that. Let's see. It says, I like the sound of soil health task force. Will there be a micro farm, less than 10 acres representation? So on the task force, it doesn't have a one for micro farms, but that definitely could be an addition. The bill hasn't been, and this question came from Tia. Thank you so much, Tia, for the question. So there has not been a person on the task force to represent micro farms, but I think that actually could be a great addition, because when we talk about a lot of our urban farmers, those are micro farms that are less than 10 acres. And one thing I realized from even doing our hemp bill, Senate Bill 57, is that a lot of people who have less than 10 acres have been left out of the process when it comes to different initiatives. So what you're saying is so true, because I would be considered as a micro farmer. If you come back to, to my personal home in Cleveland, it is considered as a micro farm, and I don't even have like an acre. I probably have maybe like a 1/4 of an acre of land. And so that's definitely a good concept. So I really appreciate that. I'm actually going to take that down as a note. Thank you, Tia. And it says, another question from Amy. My question follows the others. Tell us about obstacles you face in advance of this legislation, and how can members of this network help you in this space? Thank you, Amy. So the biggest thing is that we are in a time at the State House where not much is happening. I'm gonna talk to you guys like I would be talking to one of my friends this week, last week, and maybe even next week. You know, session has been canceled. A lot of committee hearings have been canceled. So not much is happening at the State House because there's been a big focus just on redistricting. And until that comes to the floor, not much is going on. So a lot of committee hearings have been canceled. And so we just have to get people in a place that the state needs to be productive. So that has to be the emphasis going forward. And we need to have some upfront allies to say that as we are going through this pandemic, we cannot forget about the basics. And that's making sure that we are taking care of soil health. We cannot talk about having produce. We cannot talk about jobs. We cannot talk about a lot of other things because that all goes back to soil health. You can't talk about having functional grocery stores. You cannot talk about having functional communities if the things that we are producing from the ground are not, the soil health is not a priority within itself. And so how can you guys be helpful? Well, one thing I always tell people to be helpful is reaching out to other legislators and just saying, Representative Brent has this bill about the soil health task force, and we need to make sure this bill does not only just get a hearing, but it also gets a vote. So if you go to ohiohouse.gov, there is an icon that says members, and you can go through all of the 99 members in Ohio House and send an email to each one. It makes it very easy. If you don't want to go through the website to send information to a legislator, you can always do rep, their district number, and at ohiohouse.gov. So my email address is rep12@ohiohouse.gov. And so your email is directly connected to your district number. I have House District 12. My email address is rep12@ohiohouse.gov. And that goes from 1 all the way to 99. So the first one, which is Representative Wiggins, he is rep01@ohiohouse.gov, and it goes on forth from that. Also reaching out to the Speaker of the House, which is Representative Bob Cupp. His email address is rep04@ohiohouse.gov, and reaching out to him as well as the Majority Caucus leadership team, because they are the ones who are making decisions about bills that are coming up for votes and also coming up to the floor for a vote. So that's how we have to get people engaged. And also even encouraging people to have like a lobby day about the importance of soil health, because sometimes even there's not always an understanding of the sense of urgency for this, because if we don't take these things seriously when it comes to soil health, there will be long-term repercussions for it. And I'll just say for Cleveland, for instance, we have high levels of lead. And so you have high levels of kids who have lead poisoning. We have playgrounds that people cannot use anymore because the ground has such high levels of lead, and the city has not taken initiative to rectify those things. So they just closed down the park. So that could be a way to reach out, is reaching out to all the legislators and talking about the importance of soil health and how we need to just get this pushed on. Let's see, I have some more questions. I'm liking these questions. It says, are there any statewide programs to do soil health, lead remediation currently? So there are some within our state. Is not enough funding put towards it, where it's one of those things in concept, but there's not putting any funding. I know certain areas of Toledo as well as Cleveland have those programs because it's more problematic in those areas. So basically the better answer is that where there's been a particular issue when it comes to lead, there's been some efforts to put it towards it in concept, but not the funding. And so that's the biggest thing, is that we have not directed the necessary funds when it comes to lead, to lead in our soil. And it says, another question is from Brittany. It says, thank you, Rep Brent, for your time. Since this is a systems issue, how does policy address accountability of municipal land management entities to address soil health and access to land for food production, especially in urban areas? That is a great question. That's a loaded question, to say the least. I'm about to reread this. And so this is where the thing is, and I'll just say, for living in an urban area that I live in Cleveland, people don't understand the importance of it. And so it's really just an education issue. And I literally just had a conversation with our council president-elect here in Cleveland about agriculture and how we need to be concerned about soil health and the increased amount of urban farmers, and how this is not going away. And it's not just an easy thing to say, like, we'll get our food from somewhere else. People want their food locally based. And so you have to be concerned about soil health and about people having to have raised soil beds for that. Let's see. So even what I've presented a lot of times, if I do something on a state level, I always ask one of my city council people or my county council. We have county council or commissioners, depending on what part of the state, and asking them to introduce similar legislation to back up what's going on here on the state level. So that's one way of bringing a level of accountability, because that's not always the first point of conversation that's happening within urban areas. And this is to and say access to land for food production. Now, land is the biggest commodity within all of this. And so as people are talking about even first-time farmers, people having land is the biggest key. And land is hard to come by, no matter if you're in a rural area, another urban, suburban, land is key for all of this. And so as we talk about the first-time farmers tax credit, as excited as I am about even that, and this is indirectly regarding what you're saying, we have not put enough emphasis on urban areas. So a lot of legislation that we have been passing, even here at the State House, has been for areas that's been 5 or 10 acres large. That does not help with our urban areas. And so as much as we are trying to help, soil health and agriculture here within our state, it skips the whole entity when you put parameters such as it has to be so many acres for us to be able to work on this project in this area. So you miss out on a lot of people. That's no different than Senate Bill 57, which had to do with hemp. That has no different than the first-time farmers credit, which is currently in the Senate right now. I love both of those bills, but the biggest key to both of those bills is that it puts parameters on how big the farm has to be for us to bring attention to it. And so one thing we have to emphasize even within this bill is that there's not going to be those same parameters when we're talking about soil health. That has to be something that no matter if you're in an urban area or not urban area, we have to put emphasis on. You said access to land for food production, and that's also very important. If you guys may or may not heard of Heinen's is a grocery store chain in Cleveland. They are privately owned by a family, owned by a gentleman and his family at this point. And one thing that they do inside the grocery store is they let you know where all the food comes from. And I don't know if that's something I see everywhere, but I know particularly at Heinen's, you can see where the local farmers are that grew the produce or wherever those products come from, no matter if it's the cider or if it's the onions, you can see that it came from Northeast Ohio as a whole. And so having access to land within the area is so vital, because people don't want their produce coming from other places. They want something that's locally grown, especially when you live in a state that is so, that has such an emphasis on agriculture. So having access to land that is affordable, land that is accessible is so key. That's why it's so important that we pass the first-time farmers tax credit, because people can get a tax credit up to about $100,000 when it comes to buying their land, or using that towards equipment, which is a huge help when you have farmers who are not coming from traditional settings where they might be the first-time farmer within their family, or people who just don't have the liquid capital to buy the land. But it also helps the person who's selling the land, because now they're able to sell it and actually get some money off of it. So that's very important. But even that bill, you have to have at least 10 acres. I think it's, no, not 10. You have to have at least 5 acres of land to even qualify for it. It says, Jill said, what are other food systems issues you are interested in advancing? That's a good question. I'm trying to think what other food systems. I mean, the biggest thing, and I talked about this at another event, kind of going back to the question I said to, I think it was to Gio, to this other question, is access to land. I mean, access to land is definitely the key to all of this. If people cannot access land to, then we are having a bigger problem with all of that. It's just key. Like in Cleveland, we have so many unused homes. We have a lot of empty homes in Cleveland. And one thing I've suggested to our city council is just getting rid of the houses. We have more houses in Cleveland than we have people. And it's like that in certain parts of the state of Ohio, where we have more houses than people because our population has just declined. It's like, why not remediate the soil, tear down the house, take care of the soil so people can be able to grow on the soil? Like, why not do that? So the usage of making sure people have access to land that is accessible, just financially accessible for people to be able to buy is key to all of that. Let's see, Brittany said, thank you. A process for land access, specifically for food production, is necessary if we are serious about building the community food security. That is so true. Thank you, Brittany. Tia said, which is why we need micro farm representation at the table when these bills are being discussed. I agree with you. Like, I so agree with you. I'm a micro farmer myself. I don't grow maybe as much as some other people do, but I do grow some great onions and potatoes. My potatoes are, been growing those. As it has the land bank program and helpful for connecting people who want to grow food to land in Cleveland and other urban areas in Ohio. Thank you, Lauren, for that question. So the land bank, particularly in Cleveland, has been more or less they mostly use their entity to help houses that they've renovated and trying to sell to people within communities, not so much just for land itself. That has not really been the emphasis of our land bank here, but I've definitely been intrigued to see how other land banks are addressing this issue in other parts of Ohio besides just Cleveland. And so it's Tamisha. It says some Kroger stores in Central Ohio do that too. And I'm assuming she's talking about putting a location where the food is coming from. They spotlight Ohio grown and local produce on the tags in the store. Some purchase local beef, pork, and chicken from the junior fair. Yes. Future Farmers of America, she put FFA, shout out to FFA. They are key. And for those who don't know what Future Farmers of America are, it's just, people, young people that they have these really cool coats. I'm gonna sound really interesting when I say they have these really cool coats, but they are teaching, young people how to be a farmer. What is it like to be a farmer and the different skill sets they need to be a farmer. Noreen, I think it's Noreen, says many city land grant programs often do not guarantee long-term access to the land. We need better policies relative to how people can stay on this land longer. It takes a lot of resources to develop a land bank property. True. And then Brittany also said the land banks are solely for land repurposing and have this adapt in food production, but it's mostly for greening initiatives. My dissertation was about this, but this can change. That is very true. Like, our land bank is mostly just trying to rehab houses, and it's not so much of trying to just but repurpose land that is not being used. So it's really just for those purposes that we are seeing. But I think that's a good way of just trying to deal with how do we address that within our city? Because if they're dealing with land, no matter if the land has a house on it, or if it's an empty lot, we need to be able to use it. And we also need to take care of the soil itself as a whole. So I think that, and I'm not sure whose name this is, but it says it's also a gray area about whether for profit farmers operating on land bank properties will lose their tax exempt status. That's also very true. That's also true. So you see just how much of this conversation goes into just talking about soil health. We talk about soil health. We have to bring in all these different entities about how are we dealing with, our food banks? How are we dealing with our municipalities and how they're dealing with that? How are we dealing with our land banks? What are they doing when it comes to that? How are we dealing with our grocery stores or knowing where our food is? How are we dealing with our restaurants when it comes to farm to table? And how are we dealing with our meat processors of where, not meat processors, but our cattle farmers and our pork farmers of how they're feeding and taking care of the animals? What food are they, where are they getting this food from that they are feeding the animals that some of us who are omnivores or carnivores are actually eating? So that is all goes into soil health. But I really just thank you guys so much for this opportunity. I've really enjoyed your questions. Thank you, Jill. But agriculture is an issue that we all should be concerned about, but you can't talk about agriculture unless you're willing to talk about soil health. So remember, that is the foundation of everything that we do. We cannot talk about good farming, good taking care of our quality of land, or even talk about our air quality if we're not talking about good soil health.
Thank you, Representative Brent. I'd just like to express the network's appreciation for having the opportunity to hear from you today. We're very grateful that you made time for the network today to talk about issues that are important to Ohio's food system. And it's been absolutely wonderful for the network to get to engage directly with you today and learn about your passion for soil health. We look forward to seeing how your work on equity, agricultural policy, and soil health continues to grow and evolve. And please let this network know how they can stay abreast of your most recent work and how to support your future efforts. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm gonna leave my contact information in the chat too.